My name is Narasimhan, and it is my great pleasure on behalf of the Water Resources Center Archives and my colleagues in this California Water Colloquium Committee, Professor Joseph Sachs from Law School, Professor Hanneman from Agriculture Resources Economics, Professor Matt Condall from Landscape Architecture, and Professor David Sedlak from Civil Engineering. And myself, I am in Material Science and Engineering and Environmental Science Policy and Management. If you can think of a more crazy, heterogeneous group of people coming together, it is here, and what brings us together is water. And several years ago, Linda wanted some kind of a seminar series which will reflect the spirit of the archives, which is a repository of unusual information about water in California and the American West. And we thought that it would be nice to have some kind of an intellectual enterprise which can bring people to the archives and give them an opportunity to learn about the archives. And so we came up with this idea, and clearly because the archives is not a secular organization, we had to bring the entire campus together. So we came up with this idea of this colloquium, which will bring together scholars and distinguished speakers from all branches of human knowledge related to water, natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, and engineering. So we have 4 speakers each semester, the second Tuesday of each month. And each of them is drawn from one separate discipline. There is no theme. We collectively talk to each other, this committee, and then we come up with some names who we think can challenge our imagination and present us something new and educate us, and we invite them. And this venture is supported monetarily and morally by most of the deans on this campus. The dean of the law school, Bolt Hall School of Law, the College of Engineering, the College of Natural Resources, the College of Letters and Science, dean of Landscape and Architecture, and the vice provost, and the provost and executive vice chancellor, Paul Gray, the head of the Earth Sciences Division of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And from outside, we have the Groundwater Resources Association of California. All of them chip in and give us a little bit of money so that we can treat our speakers with some dignity. And so the entire idea of this colloquium series is educating ourselves. We are all, despite our name in various different fields, we all know about water in itsy-bitsy detail. We don't have a whole picture. And this colloquium, we hope, will give us to place our own work in a broader context and be a little bit more educated. So the nature of this, we have set aside 90 minutes for this colloquium, and the speakers will probably finish their talk by about 6:30 or so, give or take some 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will have ample time for questions and comments. And over the last several years, our experience has been that the question and comment time has been extraordinarily beneficial, not only to the audience, but also the speakers themselves. They carry back something with them. And thanks to Linda and her people, this entire thing is recorded and put on the web page, so many of you can go back, and if you want to recollect what happened, you can look at it in the web page, and some who cannot come can look at it in the web page too. So we do whatever best we can with our resources to make this available to everybody. So welcome, please sit back and enjoy and take something with you today. And I now invite Linda Vida, who is the director of the Water Resources Center Archives, to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Nari. First, I just wanted to say that it's really great to see so many people here, and I also wanted to acknowledge my staff who really do all the organizing and get all of the, or make all of the arrangements. So Paige and Paul and Trina. But now to Hetchy. Since the early 20th century, controversy has surrounded the Hetchy Valley. It was part of Yosemite National Park when San Francisco was looking for a more reliable water supply after the 1906 earthquake. And it was many years before the controversial project gained momentum, and John Muir joined in the effort to oppose the dam. Today, Bay Area cities, most notably San Francisco, receives its high-quality water from the reservoir and also gets over 20% of power from the dam. In the past, there have been proposals to remove the dam and restore the valley. However, this report that was authored by Spreck, Rosekrans, and Sarah Null in 2004 has brought new attention to the dam and the valley. I'm going to introduce the three speakers all at one time, and then they're going to come up, give their presentations, and then afterwards, I think, hold your questions until the end. Sarah Null is currently working toward a PhD in geography at UC Davis. She graduated from UCLA with a BA in economics in 1998. And after that, she worked at Mono Lake for a while as a naturalist. She received her master's degree in geography from UC Davis in 2003. And for her master's thesis, Sarah used a computer optimization model to study potential water supply costs and implications from removing Hetchy Valley's dam. Sarah's doctoral research focuses on water transfers and coordinated water system operation as a means to improve environmental water use. She also works part-time for water course engineering and environmental consulting firm. Spreck Rosekrans holds a BA in mathematics from UC San Diego. He currently does work with hydrologic modeling and operations analysis to improve timing and volume of flows to ecosystems. He has worked on fishery and wetland habitats along the Colorado River, the Trinity, and the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. He works closely with water agencies, Indian tribes, and conservationists throughout California. And he was convener of the multi-stakeholder California Water and Environmental Modeling Forum in 1999. Professor J. Lund has an extensive academic background in civil engineering. He received his first bachelor's degree in regional planning at University of Delaware. He received his second bachelor's in civil engineering at University of Washington in 1983, while simultaneously earning a master's in geography. He completed his PhD in civil engineering in 1986 at University of Washington. And he currently is professor at UC Davis in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And one of his most exciting research projects involves Calvin, C-A-L-V-I-N, a large-scale economic engineering model for California, which has implications for water supply. So join me in welcoming our speakers and Sarah Null.
Okay, my name is Sarah Null. I'm glad I have a microphone because I'm losing my voice today, so hopefully you guys can all hear me and understand me okay. The project that I'm presenting today, as Linda just said, is all from my master's research. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with the Hetchy system living here in San Francisco. I was mostly interested in looking at what would happen if you took out O'Shaughnessy Dam from the Hetchy system. O'Shaughnessy Dam is the dam in Hetchy Valley, and it's just one part of the Hetchy system. And so I was looking at only what happens when you take out that one particular dam. In particular, I was interested in what happens to water scarcity Mostly, would you get more water scarcity if you were to take out that dam? I was interested in costs, water treatment costs, and hydropower costs, and in revenues, and if you would lose any of those hydropower revenues. So a little bit of history to the Hetchy system. In 1906, there was, of course, the big earthquake here in San Francisco. I keep saying here, to me, I group the Bay Area. I know I'm in Berkeley, not San Francisco. So there's the earthquake in San Francisco, and I think before that time, the water managers for San Francisco realized that they needed a better water system. But after the earthquake, there was all the fires that really wiped out the city, and then it became apparent to all the people that lived there that their water supply was not adequate, and it really became kind of a catalyst for a better water supply system. It was very controversial, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with John Muir and all the length he went to opposing the dam in Hetchy Valley. I'm not going to talk about too much of that today. The Raker Act was an act specially passed to enable the dam to be built in Hetchy Valley. Still today, we typically don't build dams in our national parks, and we didn't then, and so it took a special act to allow this dam to be built. And so O'Shaughnessy Dam, the Raker Act was passed. O'Shaughnessy was built. It was completed in 1923. And this is Michael O'Shaughnessy, this picture here. And here I always like to, I don't know how many of you guys have seen pictures of the historic Hetchy Valley before the dam was there. And I think pictures go a long way, and so I like to have people get an idea of what it looked like before. It's been compared to another Yosemite Valley. Do you have a question? Sure. Does anyone know where the lights are? Let me point it over here. This. There we go. That's okay? All right. So the reasons to restore Hetchy Valley, dam removal isn't it's still new, but today there have been some dams that have been taken out, and there's been a lot of dams that we've talked about taking out in the United States. And so I think it's important to kind of understand why you would take out O'Shaughnessy Dam. In this case, it's mostly for tourism and recreation reasons. And with that comes economics. They're going to play a large part. Yosemite Valley is very, very impacted. How many of you guys have gone to Yosemite Valley? Probably most of you. So you know that it's a crowded place. And if there were to be another Yosemite Valley, that would raise a lot of revenue, not only for Yosemite, but those surrounding towns. And so economics plays a part, but primarily it's recreation and tourism, and not as much safety or environmental reasons or some of those other reasons that come into play with other dams. So this is the region that I modeled. I think I have a pointer here. Excellent. So all of these red triangles are all dams in the Hetchy system. These are the local dams. Up here is O'Shaughnessy Dam, that's the one in Hetchy Valley. Cherry and Eleanor Reservoir, and then New Don Pedro Reservoir. I'm going to be talking a lot about New Don Pedro. This red line is the pipeline that goes down into the San Francisco cities, and then you have irrigation districts here in the middle. Here's the Tuolumne River. Oops, sorry, it kind of goes down on the San Joaquin there. So that's the region that I modeled. I modeled all of these rivers. I modeled a large area, and I'll talk a little bit more when I talk about the modeling. And O'Shaughnessy Dam itself. So like I said, when I did my modeling, I was only interested in removing this one dam. So this dam is just one component of the Hetchy system. It's about 25% of Hetchy system storage and about 14% of the Tuolumne River, of the storage on the Tuolumne River. Right now, it's currently operated really mostly for hydropower and water supply. that enables other surrounding dams like Cherry and Eleanor to be operated primarily for hydropower production. And removal, like I talked about, could open up a lot of space for recreation. O'Shaughnessy Dam is unique in California and the nation because it has filtration avoidance. And that means that the water behind O'Shaughnessy Dam is so pure that you don't need very much treatment. You only need to add chlorine, or in this case, chloramine. And so it just means that it's very, very pure water. So when I talk about removing a dam, and O'Shaughnessy Dam is a large dam. It's about 360,000 acre feet. But I like to put that in perspective. All of these dams are in the Hetchy system, and then New Don Pedro, which is owned and operated by Tuolumne Irrigation or Turlock Irrigation District and Modesto Irrigation District. And that is also on the Tuolumne River. So there's about 1.5 million acre feet of storage in all of the Hetchy system, and another 1.5 million acre feet in New Don Pedro. I have Don Pedro in this part in the Hetchy system because there's a banking agreement which the irrigation districts allow San Francisco to store a little bit of water there. So that's why I have it in both places, in case any of you guys have questions about this. So along the Tuolumne River, there's about 3 million acre feet of water. So when I talk about 360,000 acre feet, that just puts it into perspective a little bit, the numbers of water we're talking about, or water storage. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the modeling that I did. I used Calvin, which is an economic optimization model, which was developed by Jay Lund and some other professors at UC Davis. And that worked out really nicely for me because I didn't want to develop a model. I wanted to just be able to use one. And so I was very lucky that there was this great model ready to be, I thought, to be looked at interesting problems, which is what I did. In essence, Calvin minimizes costs. And so all water to all demand areas has a value. It's different values for urban areas and for agricultural areas. And so what Calvin does is to minimize all the costs of pumping costs and conveyance costs and all the different costs and try to minimize all the costs to the system. And it does that within physical constraints. So for example, for a reservoir, you have a maximum amount of water that a reservoir can hold and a minimum, 0, or sometimes the dead storage. And so those physical constraints accrue all along the system in every node and every link. And so that's basically how the model works. It uses agricultural, urban, and environmental water uses. And we used Jay, when they developed this, used a 72-year historic hydrology to represent the future. With that, it uses year 2020 estimated demand, so that hopefully it's future demand and historic hydrology, because that's the best hydrology we can come up with since we don't know what the future will be. It has hydropower, water treatment, pumping, no flood irrigation, or no flood operations. And then when I talk about, let me go back to the map here. When I talk about New Don Pedro here and the Hetchy system, currently these are not linked at all. And I assumed in my model that they were linked. And so I said that you could take water from the top, put it in Don Pedro Reservoir, or more commonly, take water from Don Pedro and bring it down into San Francisco. Currently, that's not possible. So that's the only major infrastructure change that I made for my modeling. A little bit more about Calvin. Calvin is actually a model for all of California, or for most of California. All of this colored area is the demand region, which has been modeled by Calvin. In my study, I used only this bright yellow portion. I think this is the smallest study that's ever been done with Calvin. And this is just kind of generally how Calvin works. It takes your surface and groundwater, your physical capacities and constraints, agricultural, environmental, and urban water and operating costs, puts those in Calvin. It's an optimization model, not a simulation model, so it's going to come up with the best solution, which, like I just said, is the minimum cost. And then with that, you can look at a lot of policy options. Some of the policy options you can look at is different reservoir operations, conjunctive use, sometimes coordinated use just with the surface water, water conservation, water markets, different changes in technology. And this is important. As I came to find out, my study ended up being really very simple, but I thought that a lot of these different policy options were going to come into play, and that I might have to transfer water from other rivers into the Tuolumne to make this work. As it happens, that wasn't the case. Some of the limitations to Calvin is that it ignores political and institutional constraints. And I think as I'm talking, you guys should keep in mind that the political and institutional constraints in a problem like Hetchy are very, very important. And the fact that I take them out is a major limitation. There's no flood control or recreational benefits. It's simplified, as all models are. That's why they're useful. And then it operates reservoirs with perfect foresight. And in a nutshell, that means that you can see floods coming, you can see wet periods coming, you can see droughts coming. If there's a drought, the model's going to want to save a little water. And obviously in real life, that's something that we can't do. And so models operate just a little bit differently. I did a number of model runs. The year 2020, that's with estimated 2020 demand. That's what I'm going to talk about today. I also did one with estimated 2100 demand and with a severe climate change, climate warming hydrology, which is a very dry hydrology. But I'm not going to talk about that too much today. So now I'm going to get into the results of my study. These pink lines here, all these pink lines are with O'Shaughnessy Dam in the system, and the blue lines are without O'Shaughnessy Dam. And these tops are the maximum water year. The solid is the average or mean, and here's the minimum. So this is pretty logical. This says that when you take out O'Shaughnessy Dam, you have less water in all of the reservoirs. This is all the reservoirs combined. So that makes sense. I took out a reservoir. Then I looked at the conveyance. I looked at where water was going and how it was moving. This top figure is right below O'Shaughnessy Dam before it gets to New Don Pedro. I looked at that pipeline, and it was full during the spring runoff months, and a lot of the year it was empty. Sometimes you would have some water in it. In the very wettest year, it was full, but that's very, very rare. Usually it was pretty empty except for the spring runoff month. And then remember that I said I linked Don Pedro to the Hetchy system. So then I looked below Don Pedro, what was happening. And here it was the inverse. No water went in that pipeline during the spring runoff months, and that's because the pipeline was already full. But the rest of the year, it made up. And so this is the driest year then, and all this water, the pipeline is full, and all the water is made up from Don Pedro Reservoir. So essentially, this said to me that all of the same water is getting to the San Francisco urban users, and mostly those agricultural users. But I'm using Don Pedro then. So again, just because I was talking about this, so that upper plot was up here in this part of the pipeline, and the lower part was down here in the lower part of the pipeline below Don Pedro. And then I looked at water scarcity, and this was really the big one, because it seems that if you take out a fairly large reservoir, that you would be short of water. But that wasn't the case. There was no urban scarcity at all. So all the urban users got their full allocations of water. Agricultural water users had a little bit of scarcity. This blue line is with O'Shaughnessy, so they had a little bit of scarcity already in this. I don't know how many of you guys remember the drought in the 80s. They had some scarcity there, and then I had some additional scarcity. This was another big drought period in the late 20s. But the whole rest of this time scale, there was no water shortage. And that was really surprising to me. There's no environmental water scarcity also, I should say. And this chart, I kind of just put this on here to look at how low these numbers are. So this is if you average it annually. This is a pretty small amount of water. usually less than 1,000 acre feet. And again, here's the average delivery scarcity and scarcity cost. This base case was another run that another graduate student had done, and I used it because I thought it was very interesting. He tried to constrain it how it is with legal laws and political constraints and things like that. And so I just used that for comparison purposes. That changed a little bit, that you had a little bit more urban scarcity and no agricultural scarcity, because Calvin only allocates water by cost. And so even if agricultural water users had maybe older water rights, and so they would always get their water. In Calvin doesn't see that. Calvin says urban water users pay more, and so we're going to give our water to urban water users. So this model run here was with O'Shaughnessy Dam in the system, and that's just kind of a comparison of how things work in the real world. My two model runs I compared, this has O'Shaughnessy Dam in it, and this one doesn't. And this I think is a really, if you stop and think about what this is saying, this tells you a lot. This says that there's very little water scarcity if you were to take out O'Shaughnessy Dam, mainly because of the costs I just told you about. Agricultural water users pay less for water, and so they're going to get more of the scarcity. But this also shows you, this difference in number shows you that there's a little bit more, we're not operating the system as tightly as we could, is basically what it's saying. There's a little bit more scarcity here than maybe there needs to be. And then I looked at hydropower generation. If you were to take out O'Shaughnessy Dam, there's hydropower plants right at O'Shaughnessy Dam, right below it, and then a few more lower down. And so you're going to lose substantial amounts of hydropower, about $12 million per year. And water treatment changes. I talked about filtration avoidance just briefly. If you were to store the water lower down in the system, you would have to treat all of that water. And so again, it really just comes down to economics. That's another pretty major cost. A lot of that cost is having to build the water treatment plants in the first place. And so, yeah, economics comes in. The water quality would be very high, even if the water was stored at Don Pedro instead of O'Shaughnessy Dam. And so the major conclusions that I came up with were that you could take out O'Shaughnessy Dam and not have very much water scarcity. And the main reason for that is water storage is not water. The water that runs down the Tuolumne River is the same regardless of where you store it. And essentially this model, in the beginning I thought that it might be very complicated and I might be using a lot more groundwater and different things, or transferring water from other areas. And really it's easy. It's saying you're storing water lower down in the system, and storage is storage wherever you put it. If you have a system that has fairly a lot of water storage, then if you take out a little, it might not make that much of a difference. Along those same lines, conveyance can sometimes take the place of water storage, having the ability to move water where you need it, when you need it. Having that flexibility can be just as important as having another dam. Taking out O'Shaughnessy Dam would likely be very expensive. Not even counting the costs of restoring Hetchy Valley and taking out the actual dam, but just in terms of lost hydropower and water treatment, it would be an expensive proposition. Again, you might make some of that money back in tourism and recreation money. Optimization is a very good tool for these kind of problems. I didn't have to run simulation models. You might have to run a whole lot of models to come up with these same results, and I was lucky that with optimization I let it run and go out to dinner and then spend about 3 weeks analyzing the results, but I didn't need to make a whole lot of runs there. And then another thing I came up with was that in this case, I think politics are very important, politics and legal agreements and institutional agreements. And I think that they're really what's driving the system a lot more than physical constraints. And I think, to me, I might be just naive, or I might be too much of a scientist, but that seemed unusual to me. So I think that's all I have. If anyone, I think we're going to take questions at the end. Is that correct? Okay, so I'll pass it on to Spreck.
Than Sarah, but I'm going mostly to again talk about the technical aspects. Anyway, I am Spreck Rosekrans. I'm a senior analyst with environmental defense just down the road in Oakland. I grew up in Berkeley. I actually lived on Leroy Avenue or street or whatever it is, a few blocks to the north of here until I was about 5. And this is a picture of Hetchy Valley from 1908. Most people in the country, when they first heard of Hetchy, hadn't actually seen, I can't even see the arrow here, photographs, but many saw it through paintings. Famous landscape painter Alfred Bierstadt made Yosemite and Hetchy both famous, and it was only later that the photographs sort of traveled back east and caught the attention of Abraham Lincoln for one. And Yosemite was, I think, the first public land, not Hetchy, but Yosemite Valley itself was the first public land set aside for conservation in the country by President Lincoln in 1863, just as Confederate troops were advancing on Washington. It was later made more famous, of course, by John Muir, who called Hetchy a wonderfully exact counterpart to Yosemite Valley. It's not quite true, it's a little smaller, but it certainly was spectacular and is even spectacular to visit now, although I have to admit, when I go there, I kind of want to get the water out of the reservoir and go down to the valley floor. Both valleys have stunning granite cliffs. In the spring, the snow melts and wonderful waterfalls plunge off them onto a serene valley floor. We have the Merced River in the south in Yosemite Valley and the Tuolumne River in the north in Hetchy Valley. Today, Hetchy looks like this, though. It's a reservoir, 360,000 acre feet. Sarah said it was a large reservoir. I think of it as medium sized. There are 20 reservoirs in the state of California that are larger. It's certainly important to the people who use it, however. It's a main component of a water system that provides water mostly from the Tuolumne River to 2.4 million people in San Francisco and other Bay Area communities. Let's face it. How can we talk about restoring the valley unless we have alternative plans to make sure that reliable, high-quality water would still be delivered to these people? Just because we live in Berkeley or whatever doesn't mean we don't have to care about people in San Francisco and the peninsula. So when we started looking at the proposition of restoring Hetchy Valley, it's all about making the water and power whole. We have to find a solution, a technical solution to do that, and then we have to assure the people in those communities that they will continue to get their water and get their power if the valley's restored. If we can do that, then I think we can accomplish what I think be the greatest feat of restoration that this country's ever seen. So here are the questions that we strove to answer when we did the report. Mainly we started with a water and power. We decided we did need to inspire people who weren't dyed-in-the-wool environmentalists, and these were the key questions that we wanted to answer, and we went not all the way, but most of the way toward answering these questions. Now, environmental group says restoration is feasible is not exactly news, and we have significant expertise on staff, but we also needed help, and so we hired some consultants to help us write the report. They wrote appendices, and we summarized those appendices in the report. These names probably don't mean anything to you, but they're some of the leading consultants in the water industry. Schlumberger helped us with the costs of pipes and groundwater infrastructure. EOA helped us with the health impacts of water quality and what you'd have to do to the water to make sure it would be as safe as the water is now. And Somack, Simmons, and Dunn helped us sort out some of the legal and institutional issues between San Francisco and their customers, and also the Turlock and Modesto irrigation districts, who actually control most of the river. First of all, San Francisco system has, on average, quite a bit of water. We'll get to their demand in a little bit, but about 800,000 acre feet, and you measure water, if you haven't gotten this by now, in thousands of acre feet for these water systems. On average, they have quite a bit of water. In drought years, they have a problem. And they have junior water rights in the Tuolumne River, junior to Turlock and Modesto. On average, they try and meet about 300,000 acre feet of demand in San Francisco and on the peninsula. And again, on average, it's no problem. Who cares? Who needs storage? But in those drought years, you hope you have a little bit of water in the bank to deliver to people. And they have 9 reservoirs. Hetchy is one of 9 reservoirs. They have 5 reservoirs in the Bay Area that are, for the most part, fairly small. In 1923, they completed Hetchy. Then they completed Cherry and Eleanor. Actually, Eleanor was about the time of Hetchy. Cherry was finished in the 50s. And in 1970, Don Pedro was built. This is just San Francisco's water bank in Don Pedro. Now, I need to be very clear. It's a water bank. They don't store water in Don Pedro. It allows them to divert water that would otherwise belong to Turlock and Modesto. And the Turlock and Modesto people aren't necessarily keen on us saying, just stick a pipe into San Francisco's water bank in Don Pedro and send that to the Bay Area. That's something that's got to be worked out. Turlock and Modesto get most of the water on average. They don't suffer nearly as much in droughts. They use together probably 3 times as much as the Bay Area uses. They also are required to release water downstream for a healthy Tuolumne River and its salmon fisheries. And they control 2/3 of the storage in Don Pedro Reservoir. When we started this project, we didn't have a model like Sarah had, so we had to go out and make a model. We called ours the TruSim model. Just coincident, stands for Tuolumne River Equivalent Water Supply Simulation Model. When you make a model, you get to make up a cute name. And that model forms the basis of this report you can't see, Paradise Regained, that we published last September. And the water supply operations is sort of the core of the model. And then from that, you get how you treat the water, hydropower issues, and so forth. And what we looked at first was, well, how much of the time can you expect the river to be running? Would you not even have to divert from storage? And so we assume you could divert just below Hetchy up here. And it turns out most of the water you could actually get just as the river's flowing. Of course, not in dry times of the year, and not so much in dry years. Then we also looked, as Sarah did, at diverting water out of Don Pedro Reservoir, out of San Francisco's water bank in Don Pedro Reservoir. And then actually after we released the report, we looked at another possibility of building this intertie here from the Cherry system. Turns out that's about 1% less reliable than the Don Pedro alternative, and is slightly better from probably a water quality and a hydropower perspective. This is going to be my one sort of water supply summary sheet here. And what we saw was that in 4 out of 5 years, in the 80% wettest years, again, you get most of the water from the river's flow. You get about 15% of your water from Bay Area sources. And then about a third of your supplies would come from releases from storage, either Cherry Reservoir or Don Pedro Reservoir. And in the report, we actually have a graph that looks exactly like this, that's sort of the existing conditions graph. Looks exactly the same, only this dark blue section is releases from Hetchy Reservoir. So in 4 out of 5 years, nothing much changes. You just divert it from a little bit of a different place and everybody gets their water. In the driest 1 out of 5 years, however, we have a different situation. And this is where we did something a little different from what Sarah did. What Sarah did is just lots of storage. We'll just drive these reservoirs harder. We took a more conservative approach, mainly for institutional reasons. We didn't want to annoy people any more than we were already annoying them. And we said, okay, we can still deliver so much river water from the river. We get a little bit less from Bay Area supplies. I'm pointing at that little pink triangle or pink sector there. They do have existing shortages, so these are the same as they have in their existing conditions. Then this dark blue would be diverted from storage again in Don Pedro or Cherry. And then we said, we need 18% new supplies. And we got to that figure by saying, when we get to droughts, we're going to cut deliveries. So the storage we have in all our reservoirs overall, or all San Francisco's reservoirs overall, is no less than it is in the existing condition simulation. So that way we're saying, we didn't want to say, we're just going to, be a little riskier and we think we'll be okay. We wanted to make sure we have as much insurance in the bank, and we have to then now replace that 18%. Again, it's 18% in 1 out of 5 years, so it's really on average 4%. But it's in those dry years, it's the hardest time to find water. And some people said, gee, that's not that much water. They could conserve that. Well, they probably could, and maybe they should. But we're serious about trying to promote a restoration plan, and we didn't think the message of just conserve and you'll be able to restore Hetchy would sell. So we looked at things that water districts throughout California have been doing in the last 10 to 20 years. Groundwater banking, you pay an agricultural district to develop more groundwater and to pump that groundwater in wet years, and then in dry years, and in those dry years, you get that district's surface water. We looked at just buying water on the open market, and we looked at building new storage close to the Bay Area. Again, those are things that Metropolitan Water District that serves most of Southern California has been doing, that Santa Clara Valley Water District has been doing, that Alameda County that has been done in urban districts all over the state. Contra Costa Water District has new local storage they're very proud of. That's a great reservoir, Richard. And we also looked at water quality. We basically assumed that you would need to filter it as the main change. And if we have 3 major differences from what Sarah found, we found actually that it'd be cheaper than what Sarah said. We thought it'd be only in the $300 million range to build the filtration needed, then a little bit more in operating costs, and I'll get to total costs in a while later. And safety may improve, certainly with respect to constituents of concern such as Giardio and Cryptosporidium. And on to hydropower. Again, San Francisco has 3 major hydropower plants. The Kirkwood plant right up here is just below Hetchy. That would either be totally eliminated, or you could modify the tunnel so it could still provide power when the river's flowing. Moccasin power plant here would not be operable except for when the river's flowing. And the home power plant over on Cherry Creek, this one over here, would probably not change much. Overall, we found that we would lose 20 to 40% of the hydropower, 20% if you still use the Kirkwood power plant, and you'd lose 40% of the power if you were not to use the Kirkwood Power Plant at all. And San Francisco uses much of that power, not for people in San Francisco because they're not permitted to, but for municipal uses, the airport, the municipal railway, and so forth. And much of the rest of that power is sold to the Turlock Irrigation District, the Modesto Irrigation District, and other public utilities. Does anybody ever read the Bay Guardian? They have this big public power thing and so forth. Then they claim all that power should be sold to people in San Francisco, and it's a long-standing argument that goes back to the turn of the century when developing public power was a huge political issue, and obviously for many people it still is. We didn't want people to say that we're just going to burn more fossil fuel and pollute the air. So primarily we looked at energy efficiency and pricing alternatives and renewable energy such as wind and solar. We also looked a little bit at natural gas, not to replace the energy, but to firm up the energy to make sure you have the power during those hours when you need it. Altogether, we've summarized these costs according to the different water alternatives, and we have a range of costs for each one. And the factors that influence the range are sort of a standard range of uncertainty for engineering costs, a decision on whether you would actually be generating hydropower at the Kirkwood Power Plant or not, whether you include the cost of building the water filtration plants, and some people say you would, San Francisco will ultimately have to filter their water anyway. And then also whether you're looking at sort of today's demand or demand 30 years hence. So now we'll read these. Those are sort of the key findings we got in our report. What you'd have to do, again, we're looking at a continued reliable delivery of Tuolumne River water to people in the Bay Area. And to replace that, we think it would cost between $500 million and $1.6 billion. Doesn't include a few things, most notably removing the dam. Some folks have, of course, said, all you do is leave the dam in place, punch a hole in the dam, and then restore the valley. The dam's going to be obvious when you get to the mouth of the valley, but when you're a mile up the valley or 2 miles up the valley around Kelowna Rock, you're looking at things 2,000 feet above you, and somewhere way down the road there's a 300-foot piece of concrete. You may not notice it so much. So that's certainly an option we're looking at, is leaving the dam in place. But at any rate, we want this effort to move forward, and we want all reasonable alternatives to be evaluated. So we sort of see this as a choice of what kind of Hetchy do we want for the 21st century? Do we want to have a dam and no public access to the valley floor, or do we want to restore the valley for our children and grandchildren and people across the country?
I was supposed to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What about the environmental flows
That wasn't the question you were going to ask.
I know, what was the question?
Okay. All right. Let me ask the question for Jay. Hey, come on. Hey, it's 2005. The state is growing like a weed on Miracle-Gro. Who's building new storage? We need more storage, not less. How can you talk about taking a dam out of the system and dedicating water back to the environment?
That was the question.
So, thank you. Well, how much storage have we actually built? Not a lot of noticeable reservoirs have gone up lately. And here we're measuring things in millions of acre feet. Hetchy is 0.36. And what's gone on in the last, say, 15 years or so? Oh yeah, there's this great new reservoir, mostly for water quality, over along the Contra Costa Water District. There's some real experts that work for the Contra Costa Water District. You guys should get to know them. And there's the Diamond Valley Reservoir that Metropolitan Water District built in Southern California. And most of the others have been developing groundwater, getting the infrastructure to get water back into the ground where we've depleted our groundwater basins. The largest is in Kern County, a joint project of the City of Bakersfield and Kern County Water Agency. Arvin Edison and Semi-Tropic are both in the southern parts of the San Joaquin Valley. And Semi-Tropic in particular has a website where they will sell you water, or they will sell you banked groundwater. You go onto their website and find out who their customers are, how much you can buy water from. It's a great market tool, and lots of water districts have taken advantage of that. And then another one in Southern California, developed by Metropolitan, is the Hayfield project. And together, these have been something like 17 Hetchys worth of storage developed in the last 15 years. So Jay, it's really not true that we haven't developed water storage in the last 15 years. We've got quite a bit of it that we've developed. It's also not true that we haven't given any water back to the environment. There have been a lot of projects, again, in the last 15 years where we've given water back to the environment. Central Valley Project Improvement Act that passed in 1992, principally to restore salmon in the Central Valley. The Bay Delta Accord in '94 helps with salmon, but also for fish that live in the Bay Delta estuary. We've dedicated water back in that project. In neither of these are we taking out dams. Actually, at CVPA, we took out some small ones, but mostly this is just changing the rules in how the biggest reservoirs in the state are operated. The Trinity River decision in 2000 dedicates far more water than we're talking about with Hetchy on an average year and in a dry year. And if you haven't been to the Trinity River, I suggest you go up and visit. And of course, the Mono Lake decision as well, where Los Angeles found they could replace that water and allow Mono Lake to be restored. These are, on average, much greater amounts than we're talking about at Hetchy. Hetchy, it's only 14 on average. It is more in a dry year than Mono Lake was, but it's certainly not something that hasn't been done and not something that we can't do if we collectively put our minds together. Just to compare those here, as you see, most of those volumes are far greater than what we're talking about at Hetchy. So the title of the talk, Hetchy and California's water supply, is that yes, it's an important water supply, but it's not something that can't be replaced. So again, let's have a little vision, a little imagination, and think about the kind of Hetchy that we'd like for the future. Thank you.
Does this work? I had to have an excuse to be here, so I thought I'd talk for 5 minutes at the end, since I had some involvement in the University of California Davis study, and a little bit actually even with Spreck's study. It's a little known secret that they get their hydrology for the upper basin from us. Isn't that true, I think? Yeah. So we helped a little bit with some of that. But aside from that, there was relatively little crosstalk between us. This study, at least for Sarah and I's part, has really shown that universities can actually do something and mean something in the water environment, which is actually kind of unusual, those of you that have been around very much. And I think it should be a good sign for students and even professors to look at these things. Here's an example of a university master's thesis that fit into some regular other kind of research that was going on at the university, that fed into a larger process that was already happening with Spreck's much longer term efforts in this area, and it all kind of coalesced, I think, in a very interesting way. The state has taken some interest in this. Governor Schwarzenegger's administration has taken some interest in this. John, do you want to say just a minute, a little bit about the state's, the DWR process? Because I think that's really the next step in all of this. No, not to put you on the spot, but I know you're always prepared.
Well, Spreck, and Spreck wanted somebody to ask the question of me. He's going.
That's the book.
Planned. But anyway, the state has, at the governor's direction, late in 2004, asked my agency, the Resources Agency, to take a serious look at what Sarah and Spreck and others. There's another study from another group called Restore Hetchy that has just been released. And there were also a series of reports done on this about, 17 years ago when Don Hodel, he was Reagan's Secretary of Interior, proposed this. So altogether, there's about 8 studies, if you will, on restoring Hetchy. And the state has taken a serious look at all of them, including Sarah's and Spreck's and their substantive reports. And we hope to have our review done sometime by the end of 2005.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I figured they should hear it from the source rather than third hand from some university professor. Often the movies. The Hetchy episode, I think, is a nice microcosm of what's going on in California. What has been going on in California for more than 20 years. That Spreck mentioned the Mono Lake case, where in many ways this is a much easier thing to restore technically than Mono Lake was, and probably even legally than Mono Lake was. But politically, I think it might be more difficult. Time will tell. Mono Lake took a long time to restore, and certainly Hetchy will not occur tomorrow. And I guess I just wanted to end with the thought that we in the university have a really useful role in policy problems eventually, especially if we get engaged. One of the nice things I like about today's meeting is there are 4 former conveners of the Bay Delta Modeling Forum that are here. And we all got to know each other before all this Hetchy stuff, and having that kind of professional involvement really does help in how we understand and communicate things that come out of our research into practice. It helps make our research better, and it helps make it more useful. So I'd like to sort of make that little pitch about what we do at the university. And I'd also like to make the pitch for using numbers. Certainly if we had just written a paper with lots of poetry about Hetchy, it would not have nearly the effect of a few thousand numbers that went into Sarah's thesis. So again, to the degree that you can quantitatively, thoroughly, in a good scholarly way, do this kind of work, write it up in a way that communicates well and takes advantage of what we know is occurring in practice, we have an ability, I think, to help ideas and introduce new ideas into California water management and all other aspects of our society. So thank you very much.
So we have about 25 minutes for questions.
When you talk about the political and institutional opposition, who specifically are you talking about? Are you talking to a general ideological cloud that everybody taps into, or are there particular either individuals, groups, or political bodies that are perpetually against this?
Well, when Secretary Hodel proposed this in 87 or 88, then Mayor Dianne Feinstein left Hetchy, said things like, "Dumb, dumb, dumb, the worst idea since selling arms to the Ayatollah," and there's one other one, and declared the reservoir to be the birthright of San Franciscans. She's a senator, and so she is. Okay, yeah. Go Bears. Anyway, so she's certainly in the forefront of opposition. We have done our best to reach out to her, to talk to leading politicians in the state and some nationally, and of course local folks like the mayor of San Francisco. And we've been perfectly honest that we're looking for a water power solution. We understand it's a difficult issue for them, and trying to be just as reasonable as possible. Gavin Newsom has acknowledged certainly that there's a great environmental heritage at Hetchy. And he did go up there about a month ago and said he wasn't eager to see it drained. He said that reading between the lines, he sort of agreed there were technical solutions, but how did he know if he got involved in a process that San Francisco would be kept whole down the line, wouldn't have to pay significant portions of the cost, would they still get high quality water? And we have to find a way to work with him. There's sort of a reverse politics also where Democrats in many quarters are tending to be the more environmentally friendly, environmentally aggressive folks, and Republicans less so, and yet here is a Democratic stronghold that has this reservoir, and some have suggested that some of the Republicans that have thought about restoration have sort of wanted to use it more as a political tool. Don Hodel insists that's not the case. Ike Livermore, he's about 95 right now, I had lunch with him a few months ago, and he was Reagan's Secretary of Resources in California. He's the one that suggested it to Hodel. He said he was playing it straight up, so I take them at their word for it. The Bay Area Council works closely with Dianne Feinstein, a group of Bay Area businesses, including some of the largest, and they are sort of opposed to us, and so we need to find ways to work with them. We believe that the physical solution exists, and we have to play the political game to accomplish restoration, but that it'd be a great thing for the American people, frankly.
San Francisco voters authorized the issuance of something like $3 billion worth of bonds. If that money is spent as they currently plan to spend it, will that obviate this? Will it be frittered away or wasted if we try to?
Well, about 2/3 of San Francisco's bond money. I'm sorry. The question is that San Francisco is going to spend about $3 billion to fix up the water system, and if they spend that as intended, will it sort of ruin our chances to restore Hetchy? And the answer is that about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of that money is about fixing old pipes in the Bay Area and has no real bearing on Hetchy. Some of the rest of it involves changes that are fairly significant in how San Francisco moves, stores, and treats water, and how they spend that money would make some difference. And for instance, they've been planning on enlarging one of their filtration plants. And then the incremental cost of restoring Hetchy Valley is not so great if you don't have to increase filtration all the way. And we incorporated what they had planned at the time when we came up with our $500 million to $1.65 billion range. If those projects aren't built, then it would probably go up another couple $100 million.
I have a question that I haven't heard addressed, and I'm just curious, I presume that you all have, and that is, if you don't remove the reservoir and you drain the water out, or if you remove the dam and drain the water, it's not going to look like the picture. It's going to have, 80 plus years of sediment. And so what's required to make it look like that?
Do you want to answer this?
I can answer.
If I can let Ann Hayden, who works in our office and knows more about the actual restoration, will take this question.
As for the assumption that there would be a lot of sediment at the base of the valley, since it's so high in the watershed and it's a granite basin, there's very little silt, and we've seen photos from periods when it's been drained down very low that very little sediment and silt. But there would be, a very thin layer, and we've worked with some students from the University of Wisconsin who have proposed that They've done some modeling themselves that the best way to go about restoration would be to drain the reservoir in stages, and then with each reservoir or draining period, then piece by piece go about actually restoring different environments. And it's been proposed that, well, we think that with the technology that exists today in restoration ecology, that the estimate of 80 to 100 years could probably be shortened somewhat, and that in 10 to 20 years, there would be increments of time that folks could come back and see the progress in the valley as far as restoration, and that it probably would not take that full 100 years to see what we saw, what the valley looked like before it was built.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea who would pay for who would come up with the money that would be needed to build the other plants?
Unless there's significant money from other than San Francisco and their customers in the Bay Area, state, federal funds, possibly philanthropy, we don't think the project will succeed. Our primary goal now is to try and get a public resolution of these water and power alternatives, as well as some sort of agreed upon handle of what the cost would be. I think I would stick to our numbers, but not everybody has bought into them yet. And once we can sort of fix on what a range of costs would be and what the solutions would be, then we have to start looking to see who might be willing to pay for it. And ultimately that'll be the test, I think, to see whether restoration will prevail, whether people are willing to pay for it.
You can do some sort of back of the envelope calculations. There's 3 million people that go to Yosemite every year. Let's say you can get 1 million people to go to this new Yosemite every year. And you can sort of do your discounting calculations with the number of people and figure out how much would they have to be willing to pay to do this. So one thought that I had was, well, you should just give this restored Hetchy Valley to the San Francisco Parks Department. Let them charge for admission. And then you're keeping all the same benefits within San Franciscans, but you're still taking that extra load off of Yosemite, just as a fun thought.
I had a question. You showed what the 5-year drought shortfall looks like comparatively. What's like the 20 or 50-year drought look like in terms of water supply shortfall?
I did some results that I didn't present today, and that was looking at much higher demand for 100 years in the future, when California, I think, is supposed to be around 50 million. I think it's about 90 million. I think it's about 35 million today, is that right? And then with that, I used a climate change scenario, and I used an extreme case that predicted very, very little rainfall.
About 26% drier.
Exactly, about 26% drier than the historic hydrology. And I was really surprised because my results didn't change very much. And the reason for that was the water if you kept O'Shaughnessy Dam there, the water that was there got used within the season. And so if there was a drought, it really wouldn't make very much difference. And so you can extrapolate into droughts rather than hydrologies, but the point is the same.
If you take it out far enough into the future, with a lot more people and a lot less inflow from droughts or climate change as you like, you had a lot of water scarcity in the region, whether or not you had Hetchy. And the difference between having Hetchy and not diminished. It was bad all the time, no matter what you did.
Yeah, the demand.
I have a comment. I would like to get out of California and look at California from outside. For example, These days I have been reading about what is going on in India, for example. The tremendous economic boom. Nobody is paying attention to where its water is coming from. Many people think that you can buy bottled water and survive.
No.
And India is also now thinking very big about interlinking rivers. All this came about because initially in 1947, when India got independent, they looked at all over Tennessee Valley and all these big projects, and then went in a big way about civil engineering projects, multi-purpose projects. Now, the same country which gave that inspiration, all the civil engineering which happened here, inspired all those developments. Now, having had this experience of these big projects and transferring water from Trinity, 80% of diverting Trinity, San Joaquin Valley, and having all these effects and so forth. Now, California is rethinking as to how to use its water, what are its priorities. And for people outside like India and many other countries, this is a tremendous education to learn from and experience, learn from this experience. And hopefully they will use this experience to better manage their water. So this California's history of water management, from the time of unlimited prosperity and laissez-faire economics to more disciplined use of water, it has a value for us Californians. It has one type of challenge, and for people outside, it's an enormous human experience from which to learn from, which we often forget. The same system which gave this idea of making deserts bloom and transferring millions of acres of water is now coming back 50 years and they're saying, maybe that's not a very good idea. Let us go back and take out some of these dams. And that is really revolutionary thinking and admitting that maybe possibly we made some mistake. That's remarkable.
As an interesting twist on that, one of the things that I find a little bit ironic is the suggested solutions that we came up with and that Spreck's group has come up with would not be possible if that infrastructure system had not been expanded to include New Don Pedro. If that 2 million acre foot of storage, of new storage, relatively recent storage, had not been built, it would be very, very difficult to restore Hetchy. But since that development process continued after the development of the Hetchy project to include this much bigger project downstream, now we have the luxury of going back with this accreted level of infrastructure and look at, can we reoperate this whole system as we have it now to get better performance out of it recreationally as well as in water supply.
But then, if you look at New Don Pedro Dam in relation to San Joaquin River, maybe there are some other questions that may arise.
Oh, well, that's one reason why we had the regional model. So, in effect, you can isolate, technically at least, you can isolate the entire reoperation of this to Turlock, Modesto, and San Francisco. I mean, that's, to me, the beauty of it, institutionally. I mean, it has its ugly institutional side, certainly, but you really only need to get 3 people to agree, 3 parties to agree.
Jeff? Does the moving the intertie from Don Pedro to Cherry take care of MID and PID's concerns?
I don't think so because they get their water down below New Don Pedro.
So, well, what I mean is that do they have any opposition to the Cherry intertie scenario?
I don't know that they have opposition.
They have concerns no matter what changes. If San Francisco wanted to build another reservoir, take one out, or change how they operate one, they're always going to have concerns. I think it's probably most accurate to say they don't have an obvious legal nexus to oppose restoration if you're talking about a Cherry intertie.
So long as they're kept whole, they'll be okay.
But we again annoyed people a little bit by getting out there, as Sarah has, and others, by taking this issue of restoration of Hetchy seriously. But to make progress, to really bring restoration home, we need to reach out to everybody who might be affected, to the water districts, the irrigation district, to people in the Bay Area, to Republicans, to Democrats, to the people who do whitewater rafting on the Tuolumne River. If you haven't been whitewater rafting on the Tuolumne River, you want a real thrill. I don't normally make recommendations, but the Echo Company offers great trips, as do most of the others. Anyway, but all those people have to be brought into the discussion.
You alluded to this population, and I wonder if any of you young people know what the population increase has been. I'm a third-generation Californian. When I was born, and I started Berkeley 60 years ago this year, when I was born in 1927, the year Lindbergh flew the Atlantic, there were fewer than 5 million people. There are 7 million people in the Bay Area. And if you look at that and you extrapolate that on, and you say, oh my God, no wonder there's a water shortage. No wonder we have to look at the water. The water has always been there. It's how we use it. Why are we growing cotton in the Central Valley? I mean, you've got to ask, does this make sense? Is this a good use of our water? Or alfalfa to feed livestock? Drive down Highway 5 and see what we're growing. We're not growing corn and wheat and tomatoes and stuff. We're growing alfalfa. So we've got to look at how we use the water to supply for this ever-increasing, and I say there are 50 million people in California right now because we don't count the illegal immigrants. 50 million. And I was born 5 million. You guys have
When
a big
Hetchy was built, I think it was
job.
3 million.
What's that?
I think when Hetchy was built, it was about 3 million.
1.2 at the turn of the century.
Okay, there you go.
1900. Yeah.
And if you look at the California State Water Plan that sort of reflects trends in the state, we find that there is a trend in agriculture, not as fast as some would like, but a trend in agriculture away from cotton, rice, and alfalfa into melons and tomatoes and higher value crops that use half as much water.
Right.
This will become a problem eventually, because the biggest ability that California has to absorb a big drought is low-value crops. But if you continue the trend to replace low-value crops with high-value crops that use the same amount of water, then when a drought comes, instead of following an alfalfa field, you're letting an orchard die. And that's a loss of a big capital investment. People really hurt with that. So you have to view some of this agricultural change carefully.
Have the costs and benefits of water efficiency programs been quantified? Because the studies tonight seem to be supply side focused. I wonder if anyone's evaluated the demand side to add to, with the same question in mind about Hetchy.
Actually, one of the other reports that just came out today, Restore Hetchy, and released their report today, and they encourage folks to conserve water as part of the sort of water supply solution. And their water conservation cost estimates mostly come from a report done by the Pacific Institute. And ironically, the author of that report now works for San Francisco, but she has a much different job now. Let's just put it that way. But those, the level of conservation needed to make water conservation as the alternative is something that hasn't occurred yet in the state of California for any water agency, and for that reason, we chose not to make that a major element or an alternative, because we didn't want people to just sort of laugh at us, frankly.
Well, if it hasn't been done before, doesn't it mean there's a big potential?
I think if you look at the service area for San Francisco, and you look at their per capita water use compared to any other major metropolitan areas in California, it's relatively low. And you can see why. You just have to walk around here. You can see it's a lot denser, and there's not as much outdoor, and the climate is not nearly so hot as Sacramento or Southern California. So the potential for water conservation in this particular service area while it exists, and I'm sure it's substantial, is not nearly as large as it would be for, say, Los Angeles and San Diego in that area.
Well, to be specific, what if we retrofitted all the toilets to be dual flush and have waterless urinals by 2020? What would that do for water use, and how much would that cost? That's the question I'm wondering.
I think the PUC and BOSCA, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, who oversee the peninsula water users, they've actually both released studies on the conservation potential. And I know they're online. I know that we, from a preliminary look, thought that more could be done, but both PUC and BOSCA are members of the California Urban Water Conservation Council, so they're implementing, they're making their attempt to implement the BPs that he's laid out, but more potential.
If you look at European standards for water use, urban water use, they assume about 210 liters per capita per day. That's liters per capita per day for you Americans. Whereas the average water use in San Francisco is probably on the order of about 100 gallons per capita per day. So you can see that there's a fair potential for water conservation still.
Let's do it here.
One last question.
I kind of have a really stupid question. I'm staring at this picture thinking that we can restore Hetchy for recreational use, and I was just in Yosemite about a month ago. And one of the things I noticed is that they highly discourage people from going into Hetch area. And if you go in the Hetch area, there's all these warnings about this is a watershed and make sure not to pee so far away from the street or whatever to protect the watershed. And then I started thinking about other watersheds, and most watersheds are protected and have very limited access to civilians, or a lot of watersheds at least. So I'm thinking, if we restore Hetchy, what kind of access could there really be, and what kind of recreation could there really be? Because it seems like we don't want to use this environmental reason for restoring Hetchy. We want to make it more recreational reason. We can bring in thousands and thousands of tourists, and can we really sustain thousands and thousands of tourists in our watershed?
That's a good question, and our water quality experts noted that you have to figure out, do you let people swim in the river if you're going to be filtering that water when it goes downstream and delivering it to people. Certainly, there are lots of reservoirs where there is body contact, and then that water is then treated and sent to major population centers, Folsom Dam and the Sacramento River, for example. But that's something that requires significant analysis and something that does need to be looked at, and it's obviously very far from a stupid question.
Thank you. Let's thank our speakers one last time.